standard error on your calculator if you don't have the interval program. I'm going to kind of go over it in general because I kind of have to run off to class right now. But if you guys need me to, just let me know and I will try to actually then go out and work up a problem with actually like the digits showing what it would look like in the list. Okay, so just in general, when we are doing a confidence interval for regression, remember the goal is we're trying to estimate beta. And we're going to use B to help estimate it. Now we know that our B are sloped from our least squared regression line, which is from sample data. We know our B is not going to be perfect, which is why we're creating a confidence interval above and below it. Now our standard error, notice our standard error formula is this big formula over here. Now technically, what this formula is talking about is really the change in your y's over the change in your x's. So basically our standard deviation or our standard error is trying to measure the variability. So if we have a line and we have a bunch of points around it, it's trying to measure the variability. Now we have variability around this line in two directions. We have vertical variability and we have horizontal variability. So for each of these points, it's going to be varying around the line two directions. Okay? So remember that slope itself, which we're trying to estimate here, is rise over run. Now notice that our residuals in this formula right there, our residuals is the change in the y. It's how far off vertically the point is from the line. And then notice here down on the bottom, we have how far off it is from the mean, or the x in this case. Okay, so that's kind of just setting up the formula. Now what I recommend is when you do this by hand, or really with your lists, you need to think of it almost like in two steps. You need to first deal with the numerator, so this whole piece up here, and then you can deal with the denominator. Once you have both those pieces, you can actually just divide the two numbers. So, we always start off with our regression data by having our x's, that looks like to the fifth, our x's in one list and our y's in the other list. Now, if I'm going to deal with my numerator first here, I need to get my residuals squared, and instead of always doing each y value specifically, observed minus predicted squared, plus observed minus predicted squared, etc., I can just get my residuals list, which should have updated once I did my linear regression. So in here, I'm going to take my residuals list, and then I'm going to square it. Now remember, to get to your residuals list, you go under second stat, and you can grab your resid list. You're going to plug that residual squared into list 3. Now once you have that number, what you're going to do is you're going to go onto your home screen and you're going to sum your list 3, because your list 3 is all of your residuals squared now. So I'm going to sum list 3. And I actually want to divide that by n minus 2. If our n was, for example, 20, I would divide by 18. And I'm going to square root that whole thing. That is going to get me my numerator. Now you can try to do it all at once, or you can sum it, press enter, then divide by 18, press enter, and then square root it, press enter. Either way, you'll get the same thing. So that's our numerator. Now our denominator, we have to deal with this x minus x bar. Now we need to know what x bar is. So in order to get x bar here, what I recommend is to run a 1 var stat on list 1. That will give us our x bar. And what I do is I always just write this number somewhere off to the side. So let's say x bar is equal to 10 in this case. All right, just to kind of give us a number as a reference. Okay, now I'm going to go back into my list, and instead of taking each x value, subtracting the mean and squaring it, plus each value, subtracting the mean, squaring it, that can get kind of tiring. So I'm going to go into list 4, and I'm going to take each x value, which is my list 1, minus my mean. So in this case, I'm going to use 10 because that was our example mean. And I'm going to square it. So when I press enter there, it's going to magically fill up this list 4 with all of those differences right here. Well, similar to what I did before, now I'm going to go back to my home screen, and I'm going to sum list 4. That takes care of this piece. And I'm just going to square root it. So that gives me my numerator. This gives me my denominator. That's just 2 numbers at that point that I've written down on my paper. Now I can just divide them, and that is what is going to get me your standard error value. Once you have your standard error value, you can just plug it in and find your entire confidence interval.